Okay, welcome to the 2023 annual town meeting. It's the 280th meeting we've had in this town. Town meetings have conducted since the town was established in 1742. This meeting is now officially open. Jim Majori, can you start us with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Thanks, Jim. And did you want a moment of silence?
Yes, if everyone, I don't know if I need this.
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. In a moment, I would ask if everyone can stand. We have, each year, you know, we dedicate the annual report to somebody, and we reflect, the Select Board reflects on those who might have passed and have made contributions to the town. It was very difficult this year because 34 of our valued and important and loved residents passed in the town of Northampton. So we thought that what we would ask for this morning is if everyone could stand for a brief moment of silence for all those who have passed in Northampton in the past year.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with some introductions. Supervisors of the checklist are Jane Morse, Kevin Murphy, and Joanne Knox. If you have not checked in yet, please do so now. Town clerk and tax collector is Sue Buchanan. Select board members are Jim Majori, Jonathan Panett. James Sununu, chair, is absent today. Chair of the Budget Committee is Rick Stanton. For members today, we have George Chauncey, Sean Dion, Frank Ferraro, Lisa Gagalis, and Andrew Rauchi. Town Administrator is Mike Tully, Finance Director Ryan Cornwell, Police Chief Catherine Moan, and Fire Chief Jason LaJoy are here, and also John Hubbard. I'm your moderator, Bobby Burns. Thanks to John Savastano, Luke Bedrenek, Troy Claderis, John Simmons, Dave O'Connor for doing the broadcasting today, plus Stu Spooner for all the help he gives us. Rick, do you want to open a Budget Committee meeting, or have you already done so?
Thank you, Madam. I'd like to open the Budget Committee meeting this morning to consider any articles that, if they're changed, we need to revote. So, thank you.
Thank you. Deliberative session is our opportunity to meet as a legislative body. This is a gathering of all registered voters who wish to participate. This is not a select board meeting, nor is it a budget committee meeting, though they have open meetings concurrently. Select board and budget committee members are participating in this as registered voters, just as you and I. This is your meeting. As such, if you don't understand something or need clarification, raise your hand and ask me. I can't stress this enough. This is your opportunity to ask questions and make changes to the warrant article. Under our form of town meeting, we deliberate and possibly amend articles. Actual voting on the warrant by casting our official ballots will be on Tuesday, March 14th, here at the school in the gym from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. We are limited in what we can do today. We may amend or modify, but not change the subject matter of any article. In the case of zoning articles, we cannot amend or modify them. Discussion will be limited to what can be done at this meeting, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask if you aren't sure. We will not vote to put articles on the warrant. All articles, either as is or amended, will appear on the official ballot. Each article will be projected on screen. The articles will be moved to the floor and seconded. I will then recognize someone to provide a brief explanation of the article. Others will be then allowed to speak. Some basic rules. This is a meeting of registered voters. Non-voters will not be allowed to speak. Please come up to the microphone to speak. It's not rude to get up and line up behind the person speaking. It just moves things along. Show us your voter card and state your name for the minutes. Please address all comments and questions to me. Only one person has the floor at a time. Discussion between parties is not allowed. Once you have made your comments or asked your question, I ask that you then yield to the next person speaking. If you are proposing an amendment, have it ready in writing. This ensures that we can record it properly. We will discuss only one amendment at a time. This is simply to keep everything straight. Please let others speak before speaking a second time. Remember that we all want what is best for the town. It's just others might disagree with your particular opinion on that. Remember, all articles or amendments to an article can be reconsidered at any time unless a vote is taken to restrict reconsideration. Once reconsideration has been restricted, articles cannot be reopened. The following individuals will be on the ballot. If you're here, can you just raise your hand or stand up? We have one select board position open. It's a 3-year term. James Sununu is running, and Brendan Farrell. One town treasurer position for a 1-year term, Angela Blattis is running. One library trustee for a 3-year term, Jacqueline Brandt is running. 2 budget committee seats are open for 3-year terms. We have Tom Von Jess, Larry Miller, Andrew Rauchi, and Jerry Ganazzo running. One trustee of the cemeteries for a 3-year term, George Chauncey will be running. 2 planning board member seats, 3-year term, Robert Omberg, Nancy Monahan, James Avalon, and Scott Baker are running. We have 1 water commission position open for a 3-year term, and no one is running for that position. 2 zoning board members for a 3-year term. We have Phelps Fullerton, Audrey Pryor, and Mark Janos running. And lastly, 1 trustee of the trust funds for a 3-year term, Margaret Brown is running unopposed. Okay. We're going to move zoning articles to last. Candidates night, Thursday, March 9th, 7 p.m. at the Old Town Hall, and that will also be broadcast on Channel 22. So we are, as we often do, moving zoning articles to last. Please don't let me forget them this year. So we will be starting with the operating budget. Do I have a motion to move it to the floor?
Madam Moderator, I would move Article 6, the FY 2024 operating budget, to the floor.
And Mike Tully, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The 2023 operating budget at $8,325,628 is followed by the operating budget proposed at $8,980,101, a difference of $654,000 or 7.86%. It's interesting to say that out of that 7.86%, 3.56 is due to the new buildings that were voted on, and that's a total of about $296,000. As far as the default budget, $8,680,386, a difference of $354,000 or 4.26%. So where do those increases and decreases come from in the budget? Executive line, $18,491, mainly for salaries, overtime, FICA, Medicare, all those employee benefits. Town clerk elections of $23,294, increases of salaries, Medicare, retirement, motor vehicle registration expenses. Financial administration of $19,769, same type of thing, salaries, Medicare, retirement, audit fees. We're expecting a cost increase there. Data processing of $19,000, increase in licenses and contract services and monthly billings from PCG, our IT company. Interestingly enough, I think the town's seeing the same things that most people are seeing at home, that now instead of just paying a direct fee for any software, there's monthly fees in order to keep that software going, and so we're seeing increases in that. Property valuation of $5,000 for assessing services. Legal expenses of $5,000, personnel administration savings of $17,000, mainly in the reduction of cost insurance with the new plan that we changed to. Planning and zoning at $9,500, increase in salaries, Medicare, and RPC commission dues. General government buildings, $16,311, increase in salaries, mainly in electricity and heating and oil and propane. Cemeteries increase in $2,500, electricity, heating, oil, propane. Also, the cemetery does a lot of work themselves, so there's some rental of equipment that they could utilize to do those jobs cheaper themselves that we put in. Insurance for $7,500 for increase in property and liability, offset by a reduction in workers' comp. Associations and advertising, savings of $29. Police, an increase of $28,589. increase in salaries, overtime, vehicle maintenance, gasoline, things like that, partially offset by a reduction in health insurance. Fire rescue, an increase of $107,599, mainly due to salary, overtime, and health insurance. Code enforcement, increase of $4,267, mainly for salaries, FICA, Medicare, retirement. Emergency management, increase of $6,900, increase of FICA, Medicare, retirement contributions, and training overtime. That's to do an extra training here at the elementary school. Highways and streets, an increase of $60,242, increase in salaries, on-call pay, FICA, Medicare, retirement, pavement, things like that. Savings of $1,000 in street lighting. Increase of $377 at brush disposal and $5,000 for solid waste disposal. I think we can expect to see that keep increasing in the future after talking with Director Hubbard. Recycling of $1,957, increase in salaries, mainly pushing that also with the electricity and propane. We're down people at recycling. It's been a difficult position to fill, and I think Director Hubbard's going to add a little bit more onto what we're willing to pay in order to fill those positions. One of my favorites that I never get to say is a reduction in hydrant costs of $5,000. We don't see that very often, so we're happy to see that. Mosquito control, savings of $9,500. When we went back to the budget, we started looking at what we've been spending, and we were able to make that cut in order to keep the budget down, knowing that we haven't been spending that in the past. Parks and Recreation, an increase of $8,300, mainly for salaries, Medicare, and retirement. Debt service principal, $132,000. Debt service interest payments of $164,000, and the Northampton Public Library for an increase of $40,500 in their budget, totaling $654,437. The next slide is something that we like to do every year, and it's to just give everybody an idea of where their money goes to. I don't think it's any surprise to see that the majority of our budget, 40%, goes towards public safety, with general government being second, health insurance and public works close third, and then a couple other areas of debt service and conservation in the end. And we can answer any questions if anybody has them.
Okay. Comments, questions, just come right up to the microphone. And just show your voter card. And Janet, state your full name.
Janet Larson,
Thanks.
Post Road. I just have a couple of quick questions. I was wondering if under 4153, the legal expense, if the $5,000 covers potential legal fees related to the eminent domain process, or is that just a general increase in legal expense?
When the budget was created, it wasn't created in the thought process that we would have eminent domain increases. That was mainly looking at spending and what we figure we're going to spend in the next year. But there wasn't any particular conversation about anything of the eminent domain while we
Right.
were doing those lines.
So the budget doesn't include any potential future legal issues in 2024, is that what I'm
It
understanding?
has legal issues, but nothing that we had anticipated
Okay.
primarily for eminent domain.
So you might have to increase that as time goes on with.
Okay, we don't go back and forth with
Sorry,
conversations.
The other question I have is around the police budget. I was quite alarmed to hear that they've been at deficit for the last 15 years as far as radio communications, and I'm wondering if there could be a consideration to the budget related to that, improving those communications.
Actually, that's a good question. We're improving communications with the new fire station because we're putting in newer equipment that will be a little bit better, but it's still not going to cover. I think you're probably referring to the easterly side of town.
Or just their problems connecting with dispatch in, I believe it's Brentwood,
Yeah,
whether
and
they
the
need
thing,
stronger equipment or.
the thing that would solve that is being able to put a repeater down in that area. And no, this budget doesn't include anything in that repeater because we don't really have a building high enough that
Okay.
would
Yeah,
support it
right.
at this time.
Right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Janet. Anyone else with comments or questions around the budget? Okay. With no more comments or questions, we'll be moving Article 6 to the ballot as written or amended. Do we have a motion to restrict reconsideration? Jonathan?
Yes. restrict reconsideration for Article number 6.
Excellent. And a second?
Second.
All those in favor, just raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes with a hand count. Moving on to Article 7, replacement of fire and rescue command vehicle. Motion to move that to the floor. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would move Article 7, replace fire and rescue command vehicle, to the floor.
And a second?
I'll second that.
Jim, are you going to speak to this article for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. So this article appropriates $75,000 to come out of the fund balance for this purpose, which is set at which has a total of $383,000 in it. This $75,000 for the command vehicle will be used to replace the 2013 police cruiser, which has 124,000 miles on it. A command vehicle, as you might assume, does exactly that. This is the vehicle used. To take control of emergent situations, and we have to make sure that we have a quality vehicle to do that because it also carries a lot of equipment in it. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Okay, any comments or questions on this article? With no comments or questions, we'll be moving Article 7 to the ballot as written. Motion to restrict,
All right, so
reconsider.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 7.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion passes with a hand count. Moving on to Article 8.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 8, purchase of a police cruiser, to the floor.
And a
I'll
second?
that.
Thank you. Jim, you're going to speak to this?
I will. Thank you, Madam Moderator. This Article 8 aims to raise and appropriate $55,000 for the purchase of a police cruiser. We have a regular schedule that is set by the Capital Improvements Committee with the cooperation of the Police Department to work on the regular replacement of our police cruisers. The department currently runs 7 cruisers. There are 2 cars for administration. There's 1 detail car, 3 patrol cars, and 1 supervisor car. This article would be aimed to replace the 2017 Ford Explorer, which has 82,000 miles. The current delays, as we all have experience with everything, delays in getting this vehicle could be up to 16 months. It's very important that we move on this to keep the replacement schedule going ahead. The vehicle that we are replacing will probably have about 100,000 miles on it by the time we get the new one. It's very important to understand for those who haven't read the capital improvements plan or know the vehicles. Mileage is not the only consideration with replacing the vehicles. These vehicles are used differently than you and I use our vehicles. They have many, many, many more hours on them and use on them than we would put on ours. Replacing them is extremely important. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Any comments or questions on Article 8? With no comments or questions, we move Article 8 to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 8.
Second?
Oh, second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, Article 8 moves to the ballot as written. Article 9, refurbish fire and rescue engine 1.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 9, refurbish fire and rescue engine number 1 to the floor.
I'll second that.
Jim, can you speak to it?
I will. Thank you, Madam Moderator. This article aims to raise and appropriate $250,000 to come out of the I couldn't think of the word. The fund that we have, which has, again, $383,000 in it, so there will be no effect on the tax rate for this. This engine 1, the best practice for our engines is to replace a primary vehicle every 10 years and then make that primary vehicle that you replaced the secondary vehicle. You might imagine these vehicles are not used like any other truck. They are used in very specific ways, which causes a lot of wear and tear. This, as I understand from the chief and from Capital Improvements, this truck already needs a full pump overhaul, paint and body work, and it has many electrical issues that need to be repaired. This normally happens when vehicles are used in this kind of emergency way. By the way, new engines right now are costing upwards of $1 million, and I understand from the chief, and look for him to nod his head, the delay on getting these vehicles, just like with the police vehicles, can be anywhere from 1 to 2 years before we can have one. It's important to move on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, any comments or questions on Article 9? Article 9 moves to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 9.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion has passed with a hand count. Article 10, purchase of Public Works medium-duty dump truck. Jim? Motion to move it to the floor?
I will make a motion to
okay.
move Article number 10, the purchase of a Public Works medium-duty dump truck.
I will second the motion. And Madam Moderator, I've just been informed that we should have an amendment to this article.
Okay, well,
Will you accept the amendment?
not yet, because we haven't even got started on it yet.
Okay.
So, I would say, present what you want, and then if you want to propose as soon as you finish that, you can propose an amendment, and we can go ahead with it that way.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Article 10, the purchase of the Public Works medium-duty dump truck. This is to appropriate a sum of money for the medium-duty dump truck. It's going to be replacing the 2012 F-650, which has 52,000 miles on it. That vehicle is used for plowing and moving a lot of material for all the work that our highway department does. The current rate to lease would be 6.9%, and the board decided it was more cost-effective, as we do many times, to move ahead with the purchase of the vehicle to avoid the interest charges that we would have with the lease. That is the intent of the article, Madam Moderator.
Okay, so what is the motion that you would like to make?
I might defer, if I
Mike?
may, can I defer to our town administrator?
Yeah, he's a town employee.
Madam Moderator, I'd like to make a motion that the article be amended to $98,000 as opposed to $107,000. When this article was originally put forward to the select board, it was looked at by leasing. We are able to save those costs by not leasing, so we'd like to lower the amount of the warrant article so we're not bringing in more than we're actually going to need.
Oh, and a correction to my statement, he is a resident and a voter in town, that's why he can make a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Comments or question on this article and the amendment to lower the dollar amount from $107,000 to $98,000? Everyone likes the idea of lowering the amount, I see. Okay, so can we have a vote on that amendment? All those in favor of lowering the dollar amount from 107 to 98? Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes with a hand count.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration.
Wait, we might have more comments. Is there any other comments or questions around this article? Nope? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to move to restrict the reconsideration of Article number 10.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, Article 10 moves to the ballot as amended. Article 11.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 11 for road resurfacing to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
Great. Jim, would you speak to this?
I will. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I say this ahead of the comments that I was going to make. As a member of the New Hampshire Municipal Association, we go to the annual meeting and we hear a lot about road resurfacing. If anybody has been there, I know several members here have. Northampton has one of the best programs in the state and has been modeled for what we do to maintain our roads, because it is so unbelievably expensive to do what's the word, Hub? Reclaim an entire road. Because of the diligence of our highway department, we're able to not only maintain the quality of roads in our town, but do it at a cost that, believe it or not, is less than in most communities around the entire state. This article aims to raise and appropriate $285,000 with $30,000 coming from the Municipal Transportation Improvement Capital Reserve Fund for the resurfacing of roads. The cost is up due to the cost of asphalt coming up. This is part of our 15-year road maintenance plan that we have, and the roads contemplated, and I emphasize that because things can always change, to be completed would be Woodridge, Juniper, Woodknoll, North Road West, and Highlander. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Jim. Any comments or questions on this article? Okay, with no comments or questions, Article 11 will move to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of article number 11.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to Article 12, Philbrook Pond Marsh Restoration.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 12, the Philbrook Pond Marsh Restoration, to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
And Jim, will you speak to this article?
I will, unless the town administrator wants to add some to this? No?
I can certainly speak if you'd like.
Okay. This has been an ongoing project for a long time, and I think the town administrator has
Okay.
Intimate knowledge of what's been happening over there.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, in the past, the town has supported the marsh restoration at Philbrook Pond. Most recently, we completed the Cobble Weir project, which increased flow back and forth between the marsh. It has been determined that the marsh is in poor health, and we received the grant to do the Cobble Weir and a grant on top of it for Health Marsh, or to study that. Unfortunately, with the prices of the Cobble Weir, we were unable to do that project without utilizing the monies from both grants. So we did get that project done, but now we no longer have that grant for the Marsh of the Health. The Conservation Commission is looking into various grants so that they can try to fund that coming up in the future, and I thought it was, and the board agreed that it was good planning to have some funds sitting there, because money grants require a match from the town, and it may be a 90-10 match, so you can get 90% with grant funds and 10% from town funds. So that's why we put that forward. We believe it's an important initiative, and we'd like to have the funds there if we do get grant funds to complete further projects.
Any comments or questions on this article?
Good morning, Ms. Moderator. Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. Could we just have a time frame when we would expect a grant? Are grant applications already in, or are we looking at them? And when could we expect a grant to come through?
Mike, are you,
Yeah.
Go
I was
ahead.
just waiting
Oh,
for-
sorry,
I was just
sorry.
waiting for permission to speak.
sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
We don't have a timeline on grants. I don't believe any have been applied for yet, although I know that they're considering some of them. And DES is working with us because they were the ones that approved the secondary grant to be used towards the primary project. So we are looking at grants, but I can't give you a specific timeline of when they might apply or when they might come through.
Ms. Moderator, may I ask one more question?
You may, Kathy.
Could you give us an average time frame if an application is found to apply for, and how long would that application be before we'd hear a response?
It's difficult. Every grant is different, whether it be a federal grant, a state grant, an emergency management grant. In these grants, I would suspect that some run all the way, open all the time, so you can apply for them at any point. Some of them have time periods that you can have, say, 3 months to apply, and they have a closing date. I can't really say what the average is. Some of the grants you hear back within probably the quickest is 3 weeks. Some of the grants can take well over a year. I don't have an average for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, any other comments or questions on Article 12? Okay, Article 12 moves to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of article number 12.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to Article 13, Rail Trail Equipment and Capital Improvements.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 13, Rail Trail Equipment and Capital Improvements, to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
And Jimmy, you going to speak to this one?
I will. Thank you,
Okay,
Madam
thanks.
Moderator. Article 13 is to raise $10,000 for the purpose of purchasing equipment and capital improvements to the rail trail. Hopefully, a lot of people have been following what we anticipate to be a wonderful project, which is the rail trail, which runs through the middle of town. Here, The engineering and environmental studies are in process right now. We'd like to think that the project is going to happen within the next year or so, right, Mike, where we're going to start, but there have been continued delays because this is happening with the help of the state. Construction is going to be completed with the cooperation, mutual agreements of the town, Hampton Center through Portsmouth, so you imagine that there's going to be important considerations that have to be made, and one of those is who's going to be responsible for and what are they going to do for repair and construction pieces of that of the rail trail. And we are working through that, but we are still going to have an obligation for the construction pieces, which, by the way, is going to be gravel. The whole thing is going to be hard-packed gravel and not paved, although I don't think every town has agreed to that.
No, well, the towns will have the individual choices on what finish to ultimately do, but the state's going to leave it, it's going to be similar to a gravel or stone dust
Yeah.
type of finish. And as far as I know, our plan is to leave it stone dust and maintain that.
So we're anticipating, this is an anticipation of those items that we're going to have to do with the rail trail. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Okay, any comments or questions in relation to rail trail? Kirsten?
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I am curious to know who the one Budget Committee member was that voted against this and to hear why. Thank you.
Madam Moderator? I was the one
Rick, you
that
want to
voted
grab
against
that,
it. Okay.
thingy?
I was the one that voted against it because of the lack of specificity of the equipment. I think we could have done a little bit more, and the other problem is I would have made it a non-lapsing warrant article.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic. Madam Moderator, question here is when Select Board Member Majori spoke about we will have responsibility for certain parts of construction of the trail. My understanding is the state is putting the construction through. The agreement with the town was we would maintain it. So I applaud Mr. Stanton for voting against this because of the lack of specificity of how this $10,000 would be spent. Are we buying equipment? Or are you putting this in for maintenance?
Do you want to answer that, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, and there's going to be, this is more or less a placeholder so that we can make sure that if there are expenses as the trail gets completed, that we can meet the needs of the residents and what they want out of that trail. You're correct that the state is going to do the construction, but there is going to be maintenance activities, and also we've discussed different pocket park areas that we would want to have along the side of the trail that may cost funding in that area. So we thought this was a good planning tool in order to make sure we had some funds available in order to make the best out of the trail as it comes through.
Okay, thank you.
David Raymond, 69 Walnut Avenue.
And David, you have your voter card, okay, but you've checked in. That's fine, that's fine.
I had the same question when I read this article. What kind of equipment are you talking about? Is there not town equipment already in the town highway department that could be used? Or is this permanent installation like bridges or small areas of improvement of the trail that are being talked about when we talk about equipment? I can understand maintenance, you're going to have to pay for labor, that sort of thing, but it's very vague.
Okay.
If we could have somebody speak to that, thank you.
Mike, do you have anything additional on that?
Yeah, it is vague because we're not sure exactly what is going to be needed, and we picked a number that we thought would be reasonable, but wouldn't be explosive to the taxpayer. The equipment that Highway has may be able to be used, but we're also working with all the other communities on hopefully at some point creating a nonprofit that we can buy equipment together in order to be used up and down the trail, as opposed to each individual town buying its own piece of equipment.
Yes, Michael Castagna, 13 Buckskin Lane. Actually, Michael just answered the question. Towns on either side, are they doing the same thing? Is there a way to share expenses, equipment, that kind of thing, where, you know, the burden doesn't fall on each individual town, so.
So
Mike, you've answered that, right?
Yeah, and we're also working together on signage and things like that to make sure that when you get on the rail trail, signage is the same as we move up and down between communities and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic again. I believe the Heritage Commission has been working in regards to the rail trail and the signage. Can we anticipate that the Heritage Commission and other committees in town will actually be looking at doing private fundraising for these pocket parks that you're talking about and the signs?
I don't believe Heritage has been working on signage for the rail trail. I could be wrong. I do know the Heritage Commission was interested in the Pocket Park area because they've secured a piece of the bridge, the North Road Bridge, that will come down, and they'd like to put that in that area, so that's been discussed. But I can't say what Heritage may do in the future for fundraising or something, things like that. And I can't guarantee that I'm going to have that, so this was a planning tool.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions in regards to the rail trail? Okay, we'll be moving Article 13 to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 13.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion passes with a hand count. Okay, moving on to Article 14, contribution to the Coakley Landfill Capital Reserve Fund.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 14, contribution to the Coakley Landfill Capital Reserve Fund, to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
And Jim, will you give us a brief overview of that?
I will. Thank you, Madam Moderator. This is to see if the town will raise $75,000 for our portion of the contribution to the Coakley landfill disaster. The fund in the balance as of December 31st, 2022 is $264,000. Our average cost per year, our obligation contribution to this is about $50,000 per year, and we anticipate that we are going to have a lump sum payment in 2030, a short 8 years away, of $250,000. This is a planning tool.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions on Article 14?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. Madam Moderator, could the board explain what that lump sum payment in 2030 will be about?
Ryan? Going to go to Ryan?
Excuse me. So in, I think we said it was 2030, 2031, so it's either fiscal 30 or fiscal 31, there is a $6 million reimbursement to the federal government that was initially put in to help with this particular project. So the feds basically, you know, loaned funds to the collective towns in order to start this particular stuff. And this is related to Operable Unit 1, which I believe is to make sure the leaching or whatever it may be is being retained in the area. So this is a grant that's being paid back to them. It's $6 million, of which the town is responsible for approximately 4% of that.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. There's a question behind you, Kathy.
Sorry, I guess I don't know the rules of the road here.
That's okay, Janet.
Janet Larson, Post Road. I just had a question about this Coakley landfill project. As I've listened to different meetings, I haven't heard much activity around improving the situation, and I'm just asking if there's a place where I can find information about what actually is happening now to mitigate the situation? I don't think there's been a meeting for a while or any updates, and I would appreciate that. Thank you.
So there's a group called the Coca Landfill Group that is the different, the towns, the haulers and everything that went together. And they're the ones that are designing the solves for issues and working on that. And I can make sure that you know when those meetings are for the Coca Landfill Group, if you'd like to go to those. Those are in, usually in Portsmouth at the City Hall.
There's no new information then over the last months? Or-
Yeah, I can forward information, and I have minutes
Okay.
and things like that.
All
Yes.
right, thank you.
Kathy?
Just for clarification, I believe our mandate requirement is 4% of whatever the actual final cost is to clean up Coakley. When Ryan mentioned that this represents the 4% of what we have to pay back for the funds that the federal government advanced, our requirement, our financial requirement still remains after that payment is made because Coakley is still not cleaned up and resolved. Is that correct?
I would agree with your assessment and say that probably none of us in our lifetime will see the costs end to Coakley.
Thank you.
Donna Mackay, 11 Deer Run Road. Is it possible to put a link on the town website that would update voters and residents of Northampton on the Coakley landfill progress?
Yeah, I could talk with Jan about putting a link on and putting minutes from Coakley Landfill Group and various information that comes down from EPA and things like that. Yeah,
That would
absolutely.
be awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I was mentioned that there is a group formed to work on this, and I'm wondering who Northampton's representative is on that group. Thank you.
Northampton doesn't have a representative on that group. It's a private group.
Madam Moderator, follow
Yeah,
up.
there's no one behind you. Go ahead.
Are we allowed to have a representative and we just don't, or?
No, we're part of the towns, and there's representation on that group, but Northampton can't just jump in and go into that group. But I do go to the meetings and work back and forth with the information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments or questions around the Coakley landfill? Okay, Article 14 will move to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 14.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion passes. With a hand count, we're moving on to Article 15, contribution to the Earned Time Settlement Capital Reserve Fund.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 15, contribution to the Earned Time Settlement Capital Reserve Fund, to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, and Jim, can you give us some brief overview on this one?
I can. Thank you, Madam Moderator. So this article aims to raise and appropriate $75,000 for deposit into that fund. And this is for unaccrued leave liability that the town has. This is, and I think I've said this every single year that I have been there, many thanks to Ryan Cornwell for making sure that we are on top of what this liability is. What we'd like to do is if somebody separates from the town, leaves the town for whatever the reasons, they are entitled to their accrued time that they have. We would rather pay for that time ahead of time than pay for it at the end. This fund allows us to do that. The total liability in that fund, right, or the total liability that we have for our employees is $370,762, of which, and this is in the warrant article, of which $143,587 may be payable on July 1st, 2024. That is if all of those people left. The balance in the fund is, as of the end of the year, was $63,000. This is a planning tool that the town has in the event of those separations. People leave for whatever reasons. So we'd ask that you allow us to continue to manage this in an appropriate way. Thank you.
Okay, any comments or questions around this article? With no comments or questions, Article 15 moves to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 15.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Moving on to Article 16, contribution to the Town Revaluation Capital Reserve Fund.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 16, contribution to the Town Revaluation Capital Reserve Fund, to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
And Jim, can you give us a brief overview of this one?
I can. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Every 5 years, the town is required by the DRA and state statutes to complete a town revaluation. That revaluation can take a couple of different forms. It can be a full measure and list. Somebody knocks on your door from the assessors, and they go through and do every piece of your house and your property to get that assessment. Or you can do, why am I forgetting the word, Mike? Not the full measure and list.
Yeah, I can't think of the term, I'm with you.
Statistical reval, thank you. We did an analysis many years ago that the statistical reval was giving us for the value of that, which averages, we were spending about $75,000. It's been less in years, which was giving us an accurate measurement of what the assessments were for our properties versus the exponentially higher full measure and list. So we have been doing it this way for many, many years. So we're looking to put $14,000. Each year, we put a small amount in there so that by the 5th year, we have the total amount that we need for the reval. And that reval is coming up.
It's already begun.
Oh, it has begun. I was going to
Yeah,
ask you when we're going to start.
It's
Okay.
already begun, and it should be done by late spring, early summer.
Excellent.
Okay, any comments or questions on Article 16? Okay, with no comments or questions, Article 16 moves to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 16.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone against? Motion passes with a hand count. Article 17, rent or lease municipal property.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 17, rent or lease of municipal property, to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
And,
I'll speak, but if I could also defer to our town administrator.
okay,
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So Article 17, to rent or lease municipal property. This is for long-term leases long-term lease agreements that the town may enter in on municipal property, which was discovered by our town administrator, and I'd like to see if I could turn it over to him for a full explanation.
okay.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Yes, actually, when we were looking at the cell tower issue and things like that, we discovered this issue and that it had never been passed by the governing body, which requires that this be passed in order to do long-term leases. The interesting thing about it is it's not just about a cell tower, but also about solar arrays, if we want to do those. Generally, anything that you can think of that has a long-term outcome. Often with solar, the payout isn't for municipal buildings until 15 or 16 years. So we discovered that this hadn't been passed, and we put it forward to the voters.
I'm going to ask one question on that. So is this one of those articles that is defined by law as to how it's worded?
I don't know if it's a particular wording. This did go through the attorney, though, when we
Okay.
discovered
But
it.
there's no RSA that demands this be worded like this?
Not,
There is? Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is one that's covered by an RSA that specifies it.
and we had the attorney write it so that it was acceptable for the RSA.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Any comments or questions around this article?
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I have two questions, if I'm allowed.
You are.
Is the town currently have any existing leases that would be subject to this?
Not that I know of.
No existing. Madam Moderator, may
You can
I
go, there's no
do
one
a
behind you.
Second question. Oh, yes. So this little blurb does not explain what the current law is. So could you please specify what is the current law?
I don't have
Or
the
the-
exact wording, but my understanding is that if we want to do anything longer than a one-year lease for anything on town property, that we need to pass this through the residents first.
Okay. And
Here,
so-
do you want me to read you what the
No,
RSA
no,
is?
I'm good. So
No.
just one more question, if I may. So this would allow the town, I just want to make sure it's crystal clear, to lease town property for 5 years without any public vote. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Lori Cotter, 168 Mill Road. In the terms of this article, it says that any municipal property not needed for public use. So any town property that's not needed for public use would be under the stipulation of this warrant article?
Do you get the question there?
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
answer
you
that.
can go ahead and answer that.
Yes, and that would be up to the determination of the select board.
That if it's not used for public use?
Yes.
Thank you.
Michael Castagna, 13 Buckskin Lane. Any revenue gained by these leases, which pot does it go into?
Mike?
Yeah, any income that comes in can't be spent that budget year. It falls to general fund.
Thank you.
Janet Larson, Post Road. I'm just wondering what the downside of a one-year lease is, which would give us an opportunity to evaluate that 1 year, and then maybe the next time it comes up, we could put in for a longer lease?
Yep, you're absolutely correct. There isn't a problem with that. The issue may arise that we want to do something like put solar on the roof of the fire station or the library, and we would have to wait until the next year to put this on in order to do it. But that could be done that way also if that's what you'd like to do.
I would, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. I would, Ms. Moderator, I would like you to read that RSA so that everybody has the details of the law that this is related to.
I think Rick's about to do that because he has it in his hand.
Madam Moderator, Rick Stanton, Walnut Ave. The RSA is 41:11-A, town property. Paragraph 2, the authority under paragraph 1 shall include the power to rent or lease such property during periods not needed for public use, provided, however, that any rental or lease agreement for a period of more than 1 year shall not be valid unless ratified by the vote of the town. I think that's the operative portion of the regulation.
Thanks, Rick. Kathy, did you have another question?
Can I make a comment?
You can make a comment, yes.
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. I just would want to go on the record saying that I personally is very uncomfortable with the town entering into a lease without the townspeople actually voting and making a decision. It's concerning that a board of 3 and a town administrator would make that decision in a vacuum without having a vote of the entire town.
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. If I may be allowed to also make a comment.
Of course you are.
Seeing no problem with the current New Hampshire law as it stands and agreeing with what Ms. Kilgore said, I will enthusiastically be voting no on this article. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any additional comments or questions? Okay. Article 17 moves to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 17.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes with a hand count. Moving on to Article 18, readopt all veterans' tax credits.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 18 to readopt all veterans' tax credits to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
And Jim, can you give us an overview of this?
I can. Last year, Madam Moderator, the state legislator, let me get this, try this again. The state legislature made amendments to RSA 72:28B, the All Veterans Tax Credits. Those amendments, which benefit anybody, as you can read the article there, which benefit all veterans, and that contained there, and provide up to a $500 tax credit, needs to be readopted by the town with this amendment. So it is just an administrative change that we need to handle.
Okay, any comments or questions around the veterans tax credit?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue, Northampton. I was on the select board when we increased the credits due to Selectman Miller's suggestion. When you guys were speaking about putting this on the ballot, was there any discussion on increasing the credit? Because I do know we're not even meeting the surrounding towns to the credits they give to their veterans. And I think it's an important part that we should do.
I can speak to that. We had a discussion about the statutory requirement to readopt the article so that we can provide the credit. That was the extent of our conversation.
Thank you, Jim. Another question, Kath?
Madam Moderator, could we, do you know how high we could bring that credit up to?
Not off the top of my head, but I can research that and get back to you.
So we would have to wait until next year to make a motion to increase the credit to the veterans?
We would, Madam Moderator?
Yep, go ahead.
If we're going to make changes to the credits, exemptions, et cetera, that we're going to provide, we need to wait another year, yes.
I'd like to make a request that that be considered for next year.
Rick?
Madam Moderator, if I may comment, I'm Rick Stanton on 108 Walnut Ave. When I was a selectman, the issue came up, and doing the research among other towns, we match just about every other town that provides a veteran benefit. As a veteran myself, I had particular interest in this, and this will just equalize it out. It makes a little bit of a difference because there was some language difficulties with the statute that the legislature at the state passed, and now people that are on active duty can actually get that discount as well.
Thank you, Rick. Any other comments or questions around this article? Okay, Article 18 moves to the ballot.
I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article number 18.
Second.
Okay, moving on to Article 19. Do I have a motion to move this article to the floor? Yeah, make a motion to move the article to the floor first, Kirsten.
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I move we move this article to the floor.
Do I have a second for Kirsten's motion? Kathy Kilgore is listed as the second to the motion. Kirsten, would you like to speak to this article?
Sure. Do you want me to read this as well?
The article?
Yes.
You can.
Article 19, taxpayer funds towards eminent domain by, and I'll go ahead and read. On behalf of at least 25 registered voters pursuant to RSA 39:3, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate through taxation the sum of $0 for the purpose of obtaining an eminent domain easement in connection with a cell tower in Northampton.
Okay, would you like to explain the article?
I would love to share with you that the intent behind this was not because I believe that the Cotters should not be reimbursed should this happen, but I guess, as our chair said, maybe to muck it up. I think when we're talking about eminent domain, I think it deserves full conversation, open dialogue by the voters, and transparency, and that is why I put this on here. I do not think this is an issue that should be taken lightly, and I certainly don't think that taxpayer dollars should be paid to attorneys and consultants to take one of our neighbors' land. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else that would like to speak to this article, you can just line up at the microphone. Jim?
Jim Avalon, Three River Road.
Jim, do you have your, did you sign in?
Yeah.
I know you're a registered voter, though. Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to say I agree with Article 14 because it prevents Northampton from making a grave mistake. Using eminent domain, it's an historically abusive and mean process for taking private land for public use. This is a particularly grave mistake because in this situation, we're going against New Hampshire law. In 2006, the Senate Bill 287, signed by Governor Lynch, easily passed through the House and the Senate. It says, the words, listen, public use shall not include the public benefits resulting from private economic development and private commercial enterprise. And additionally, Northampton is going against the New Hampshire Constitution with this eminent domain. Constitutional Amendment CACR 30 states, no part of a person's property shall be taken by eminent domain and transferred directly or indirectly to another person if the taking is for the purpose of private development or the private use of property. 85% of New Hampshire voters voted for that constitutional amendment. So Article 14 prevents Northampton from going against the New Hampshire law and also the New Hampshire Constitution. So I just want to say I agree with this. So to prevent us from any lawsuits, prevent us from making a mistake, and creating division. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I would just like to state for those that might be watching on Channel 22 and clarify that when you vote on the ballot, this will be Article 19 on the ballot. Any other new comments or questions in regards to this article?
I used the wrong article number.
Yeah.
Because it changed.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm short.
That's okay. Many of us are.
Lori Cotter, 168 Mill Road. I speak to this warrant article based on the fact that we can't go through with this. This is really something that I don't want taxpayers to have to pay for. $0 is appropriate. We don't want the selectmen to be able to control what they can buy and what they can take away. I just wanted to make the comment that $0 is okay with us because we don't want anything to happen through eminent domain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. Any new comments or questions?
I don't know if it's quite a question or a comment, but I think that the spirit
Wally,
of this...
you need to
Wally
state your
Kilgore,
name.
220 Atlantic. You'd
Thanks.
think after 30 years of it. Does this article, to overcome this article, would it require a warrant article for any eminent domain procedures for this type of acquisition, or is this exclusive to cell towers? Just, I don't know if you have an answer to that or not. I don't know if I made
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. This was written specifically for cell tower use. My understanding is we cannot amend the language, just the dollar amount.
Okay, go ahead. You have another comment?
Just one more comment, I think, to reiterate on the confusion about the article number. What was posted on the actual town calendar for the warrants to be discussed today does not match what we were given when we came in, so
Yes,
that's the difference.
official ballot is always different because it
Thank-
includes zoning.
Okay,
That's why I
thank
just
you.
wanted to make that clarification for voters. Okay. Any other comments or questions in relation to this article? Okay. With no further was there one? Oh, sorry, Frank. Frank, move. Go ahead. Go ahead, Frank.
Move to restrict reconsideration.
Do I have a second on that? That second would be Kathy Kilgore. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration? Anyone against? Okay, motion passes with a hand count. Article 19 moves to the ballot as written. Article 20, consideration for cell phone tower by citizens petition. Do we have a motion to move this to the floor?
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I move to move Article 20 to the floor.
And a second? Second by Janet Larson. Kirsten, would you like to speak to this article?
Sure. So rather than read it, because it's there and you all have it in front of it, I'm going to just speak to the intent, if I may.
That would be great.
I've heard a lot of discussion about the school as a location for a cell tower, and after looking at the map of the 85 acres, I wondered, why has this not been discussed openly and transparently? So I put this in. I'm glad that it has opened discussion. I would like to just say that the presentation that was given by the consultant showed the tower at the edge of the playground. That was not my intent. When I filed this, there's 85 acres that go a long way back, but basically, again, my intent was to open dialogue about what other options are there other than taking a neighbor's property to put a cell tower in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kirsten. Any comments or questions in relation to this article? Okay, seeing as there are no comments or questions, Article 20 will move to the ballot. Oh, wait.
Hi, my name's Amy Margolis, 130 Woodland Road, Northampton. Concerning the cell tower at the school grounds, the cell tower needs to be 329 yards from any kind of dwelling or people. And that has to be very important because the cell tower, it has been well documented, can develop, one can develop brain cancers and variations of cancers from it. So it is a little bit concerning that it would be near a school of any kind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any other comments or questions? Kirsten?
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road, if I could just respond to that. If it is concerning to put a tower close to a school with kids in it, then I would be equally concerned for any other residents with a tower in a neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
David Raymond, 69 Walnut Avenue. Getting back to the idea of locating the tower and taking land by eminent domain.
I'm sorry, David, you're out of order. We've already moved to restrict reconsideration. So we're talking about this particular article to look at this map and lot by the Select Board as an alternative.
Okay, very good,
Sorry.
thank you.
Concerning the Article 20, possible having a cell tower near a school and children, or near any dwellings, I did consider giving I have 50 acres for the cell tower. I just want to put that on the.
Thank you, Amy. Other Amy, go ahead and come on up. Amy, do you have your voter card with you?
So that's,
Amy, no, you're not a registered
I
voter,
know,
I'm sorry.
I
You
just wanted
can't
to
speak.
use myself as
You're
an
not a
exam-
registered voter, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to prove the point that
I'm
if you're
sorry.
not one, you
I'm
should
sorry, you're
become
not a
one.
registered voter.
Yep, thank you.
Kirsten?
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I just have a question. I understand that the previous article has been closed for restriction, but eminent domain is mentioned in this article. So could the gentleman not speak
Oh,
if
it
eminent
is.
domain is mentioned? Thank you.
Okay, so was your question in relation to this article?
My question was whether or not the idea of eminent domain of public lands or land to be used for private commercial gain by another company, was that not considered in the proposed location?
Okay, again, I'm going to say that question really, I'm sorry, I can't see how this relates to this particular article, unless I'm missing something.
Okay.
Jonathan, do you have a question? No, okay. Okay, anything related to this particular article? Any other comments? Okay, I think we're going to be moving this article to the floor. Frank? All right, you got your mouth full. I can already tell Frank is making a motion to restrict reconsideration.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? George? Second from George. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration? Anyone opposed? Okay, with no further, oh, no, we do have further business. Once again, I'm going to miss the zoning articles. Can someone make a motion to move all zoning articles to the floor at once, because we can't amend them? So that would be Article 2 through 6. Frank, will you make a motion? George, will you second? Okay. Nancy, can you speak to the zoning articles for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. The Planning Board has 4 proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance this year. All 4 of them are clarifications of existing zoning ordinances. The first that you see here is Section 401, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which Northampton has had for many, many years. In the last couple of years, we've had a lot of applications for ADUs, as we call them, and we realize that there is some confusion among applicants because of the way it was worded. So this article simply expands the language in the existing ADU ordinance primarily to explain what it is meant by an attached ADU. Nothing else has changed. It's simply to give applicants a little more explanation of how their ADU has to fit the ordinance. No, there's no new issue in this.
Any comments or questions around Article 2? Frank?
Frank Ferraro, Post Road. Yeah, I'd just like to say, there's an awful lot of discussion about available housing and the lack of affordable housing. And some people have one interpretation of what an ADU should be. Others have different interpretations. The purpose of this article, in addition to clarifying things that the planning and zoning boards think there should be, this further restricts the use of an ADU in the town. The state specifically passed legislation a few years ago that said that towns couldn't prohibit ADUs. They could put certain limits on them. Our town has put more restrictive requirements on ADUs than some of the other towns have. And this would further do that by putting in the requirements that there be a common wall between the units, and that architecturally you couldn't add anything to an existing building. So basically this comes down to a in-law apartment that's built inside or modified inside an existing house. And I think that we shouldn't be further restricting potential housing in the town because we have a tough enough time having affordable housing as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I don't think he actually had a question. I think he was just commenting. I think he was just commenting, Nancy. Frank, you didn't actually have a question in there. It was just a comment, right? Okay. Wally?
Madam Moderator, Wally Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. I have an issue with this article and the following planning articles as a fairly in-tuned voter. I was on the website looking at the warrant articles that were listed on the calendar and was surprised to see these planning board articles included in today's warrant. I actually made the comment saying, wow, they took a year off of the planning board. And then get here and find out Article 2 is not about replacing a fire engine or modifying a fire engine, but has to do with an ADU. I think that the fact that this wasn't properly noticed, as far as most citizens would look at the warrant articles that were going to be discussed today, I find a very hard time actually finding them legitimate in today's meeting. People are affected by this particular warrant article, people who own homes. I'm sure that if they saw this in the posted warrant articles that were on the website, directly linked from the calendar, this was not included. And I have a very big issue. This isn't specifically to any, but I know several homeowners that are going to be impacted by this that probably have no idea this existed because they looked at the warrant articles linked from the website calendar for today's meeting, which is how most people found it. And I looked while we were here, and I didn't find any other real easy links to this particular warrant article. I would question its validity. I'm sure it's properly posted with the state, and I'm sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, because I know, Madam Moderator, you're very thorough.
Well, I don't
However,
actually do that part, but.
However, I have a real issue with the fact that, as a voter, the mechanism which I would assume would show me all the warrant articles for today's meeting were not there. And I would like a very detailed explanation on why my fellow citizens and my fellow taxpayers and my fellow voters can't be here to discuss this particular article, because they weren't informed that their property may be impacted by any one of these next few articles. This is, again, not specific to this, which I don't agree with. Again, I'm with Frank. But, Madam Moderator, I would ask for an explanation on why the public wasn't properly noticed through, and I looked in the past warrant articles, the calendar's great, internet's forever.
Let me see if I can see if someone has an
last year
answer to
and
why
the year
this wasn't on the website.
Last year and the year before, they were posted through the link on the website. So, from the calendar. So again, I'm just an average guy looking up
Okay.
warrant articles. Thank you.
Mike, any idea?
Yeah, the warrant was posted properly according to the law. I apologize if it didn't get updated on the calendar to with all the articles, and I'll look at that.
That's
Okay.
an adequate answer. Thank you, Mike.
Janet?
Madam Moderator, Janet Larson, Post Road. I also agree that it was quite a surprise when I came in this morning and saw the number of zoning warrants. I actually try to be a very informed voter. I try to look at all the details and look up things I don't understand so that I can make an informed decision. I think that the people of Northampton need to participate in the deliberative session, and it's always a shame that not more people are involved. I think the people that do want to get involved really deserve and would benefit from the most information, because I say that when you don't have information, you fill in the blanks, and it maybe causes a lot more discussion and concern than it needs to. So I also was asking where the information was on these zoning on these zoning articles, because I was looking for them, didn't find them, and also heard the comment that maybe there weren't any this year, which was a surprise. So just for the
Okay.
record.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank-
Any new comments or questions?
Michael Castagna, 13 Buckskin Lane. This is really a comment. This comment comes as a citizen of Northampton, but also I'm the chairman of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast. And this article really does limit and prohibit the ability for ADUs anywhere. I mean, it's not just this town. It's regional, and to restrict the ability to create ADUs, which is a tool for smaller towns and problem areas to create affordable housing, just goes against the state law. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions around Article 2?
Hi, Amy Margolis, 130 Woodland Road. I was wondering, Article 2, can we just delete it
No.
or not have it on the ballot?
No.
So somebody
zoning
brought it-
articles, so zoning articles go through a full public hearing process by law. They cannot be amended or removed from the ballot. Your way to address your feelings around this article are by voting.
By voting. So my question is then, who put this up to have it written as it is?
The planning board.
It was kind of a mistake.
Okay, any other questions around Article 2?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue, and this is just a comment. I want to go on the record that I don't agree with this proposed amendment. I know that there's a lot of concern about ADUs. I know there's a lot of concern about affordable housing in Northampton, probably not the correct concern. But I just want to make people aware, this just doesn't affect maybe people renting an ADU. This affects families. It affects families. As the housing crisis continues in New Hampshire and across this nation, families need to be able to support each other. They also need their own spaces. So I think a lot of people look at this as a choice that they might be able to help another generation in their family get on their feet. And what we're doing is handicapping that. And I do not think it's right.
Larry? Go ahead.
I don't want to be stabbed or something, so after the last public meeting, I just like people to know that I'm going to be supporting this, and also, if you're cold, it's much warmer in the men's room.
Thank you, Larry.
In the men's room.
Even to Larry.
Pollyanna?
Pollyanna Ford, Walnut Ave. This may be a very stupid question, but I know that there are rules already about this, and this is just I think I know the rules, and I understand that it says to clarify. What is the problem with somebody having one of these? Like, what is the purpose of putting rules around this?
I'm going to ask Nancy, do you want to answer that as the planning board rep?
There is no problem with having an ADU, and with all due respect to Mr. Ferraro, this is not Northampton has had an ADU ordinance for many, many years. In 2017, I believe it was, the state mandated that every single-family home could have an ADU. This is an outgrowth of the old, everybody used to call the mother-in-law apartment. At that time, Northampton amended its ADU ordinance to comply with the state-mandated language. And this ordinance does not restrict, this proposed amendment, does not restrict what we already have and what we had before the state mandated it. What this does is further explain the ADUs that are allowed are within a single-family home or attached to a single-family home. There are architectural issues, that was in the state language as well, that we had in the old language, to maintain the look of a single-family house. There's no restriction of adding an ADU onto a house. This simply expands to explain to people what does it mean to be an attached ADU, period. So there's no restriction. There's nothing in here that says they have to be affordable or they can't be affordable. There's no guidance from the state that these must be affordable housing. This is what people who own ADUs charge the rent that they want to charge. I agree there's a housing issue, but every single family home in Northampton is entitled to an attached or inside ADU, period. There's no further restriction in this amendment.
Thank you, Nancy. Frank?
Frank Ferraro, Post Road. In deference to Ms. Monahan, yes, it does. Northampton has some of the most restrictive ADU requirements of surrounding towns. And there are a couple, right now, you can have an ADU without having a common wall and without having the architectural features. This limits and tones down, again, to basically an in-law apartment because of the common wall function there. And so there are ways to do an ADU now without having a common wall and without having the architectural features. So this does further restrict an ADU. And again, in a town that constantly talks about lack of workforce housing, lack of affordable housing, we shouldn't be further restricting housing. So, thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Kirsten?
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. I have a question and a comment, if I may.
Sure.
My question is, should the voters vote to pass this article, would it be retroactive or would certain ADUs be grandfathered in? That's my question.
First, to Kirsten's question, no, this does not become retroactive. It goes forward. Anybody who already has an ADU, is that your question? Yeah. Anybody who already has an ADU is not subject to this at all. To Frank's issue, this does.
I don't,
I'm sorry?
can you, oh, all right, go ahead. You're arguing Frank's issue. You really got to let Kirsten go
Oh, right.
with her second piece.
So my comment, I will enthusiastically be voting no on this because I think I agree with Frank. Our laws are already too restrictive. People should be able to do what they want on their land within current zoning ordinances to allow for family members to live on their property. And I hope that the voters would really pay attention to these zoning articles instead of just looking at the recommendation numbers when they vote on in March. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Nancy.
One last comment, and I'll go on to the next one. This does not restrict anything beyond what we already have. There is no restriction on here beyond what we already have. I'm sorry. I'm sorry
Okay,
if it
we're
reads
gonna,
that way.
we're going to
then-
have people disagree here, and
Yeah.
it's okay that you have different
Just
opinions on this.
Because people seem to be concerned that this is more restrictive than what we already have, and it is not, so. All right.
Okay, wait, no, there's still more questions and comments on this article, so. Wally, go ahead.
Wally Kilgore, Atlantic Ave. I would respectfully disagree with Ms. Monahan. The way this reads to me is that if you have an attached garage with a staircase going up to the above space of that garage, that would not qualify as an ADU in this particular wording. Not having a common wall, but still being a building that is attached to the main structure. So, yeah, it would be very much more restrictive, Ms. Monahan, because there is no wall. So I would find that if a petitioner came before the planning board with an application that had an above garage apartment with a staircase that went up there that did not have an adjoining wall, that they would be able to decline this application based on this language.
Okay, any other questions on Article 2?
May I just respond to Mr. Kilgore? That is not what this amendment says. If you have an attached garage that has an ADU on the second floor, and the garage is attached to the house with a staircase going to the ADU, there's nothing wrong with that. That qualifies as an attached ADU, the common wall being the garage to the house. That's what it is. I mean, I'm a little concerned about, as we go on here, that this language may be so confusing that everybody thinks it's a restriction, and that is not at all the intent of this ordinance. So.
Okay, Article 3, Amendment to Zoning Ordinance.
Okay, this one is,
Oh, did you, Amy, do you have a comment on Article 2? You can't.
restrictive.
Amy Margolis, 130 Woodland Road. I have a question concerning, a wall is a wall, so why wouldn't that be restrictive in the Article 3 verbiage of being restricted? If it's not a restriction, then why do we have it there? Otherwise, we wouldn't have Article 3 at all. That's my question.
2. That's okay.
I'm not, the existing ordinance says that the ADU and the primary dwelling, the house, must have common's not in there, a doorway between them. That's from the old mother-in-law apartment, and the language that was, I must say, the bare language that was provided by the state. We found that a lot of applicants were confused about the door. We had one application where the common door, the door between the ADU and the house was in the closet, trying to meet the qualifications of the ordinance. This is clarifying that the door has to be on a wall, so if you open the door, like an attached garage, if you open the door from the garage and step in, you're in the house. That's a common wall with a door between them. We did not have, in the existing ordinance, we did not have that common language. We thought when this was done that the door, having the door to be used by both sides was sufficient language, but it obviously was not, and perhaps this isn't either, but does that answer the question?
Quick question. I have a quick question.
I think Frank got there before you. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, again, with respect, Frank Farrell, Post Road. Your example of what someone tried to do is exactly why it makes it more restrictive. That person found a way to comply with the existing requirements, and the planning board didn't like it, so you're putting an additional restriction on. To my point, it's more restrictive. Secondly, Mr. Kilgore's example, this zoning requirement says a common wall between the living spaces. So if you have a garage that's attached by a breezeway and there's an exterior stairway going to the second floor of that garage, that would not qualify as an ADU because it's not living spaces that are common. So the wall isn't between the living spaces, it's between the primary house and the garage, which is still part of the primary house. So again, it continues to make it more restrictive. Now, these may be just one-off examples, but it proves the point that this will be more restrictive.
Wait, let's go.
Can I move to restrict reconsideration on this?
Not when there's people that are still commenting, asking questions. I don't think you'd get them to vote for that right now. Go ahead, Kathy. Though I would say, let's keep your comments to things that are new. Just reiterating the same thing that's already been expressed. We've had that expressed. So let's go to new comments and questions.
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. I would just like to make a suggestion or recommendation. I think it would have been very helpful to have the ordinance, the state ordinance or the RSA, I'm not a planning person, as it's by law, have that here. It'd be helpful to have that referenced, to know if we're changing our zoning, or our words in our zoning or the existing zoning we have. It'd be helpful to see how it is stated now and what your change is making. That was my suggestion. I believe that used to happen.
Okay. Jim?
Jim Avalon, Free River Road. This is a big issue. These ADUs. I live lived across from a rooming house in Massachusetts. And what really bothered me about ADUs, or rooming, was the parking. All these issues weren't is when you have an ADU, if you have like 10 cars across from you, so it's a big issue, and I'm wondering, is there any restriction on parking with ADUs? Like how many cars can you have?
That's outside of this zoning ordinance. Sorry, Jim. Okay, any other questions related to this zoning ordinance? Okay, we're moving on to Article 3. Now you
Can I move to restrict a reconsideration of Article number 2?
There's no reconsideration.
This is really not, yeah, we can't amend it, but you want to restrict discussion of Article 2? Okay. Second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of restricting any discussion around, further discussion around Article 2, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Article 3.
Okay, this next article is to amend Section 6025C on accessory structures used for agriculture. There's conflicting language in the zoning ordinance that was identified by the town planning and zoning coordinator, and this makes it clear that the setback requirements for accessory structures used for agriculture are the same as the setback requirements for all accessory structures. There are two references in the zoning ordinance that don't match, and this is just clarifying it. It's not changing anything, it's not changing any setbacks, not changing any issues, it's just clarifying for those who say, what is the setback for an agricultural accessory structure? Same as all the other setbacks.
Okay, comments or questions on Article 3?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. Just have the inquiry on whether the Agriculture Commission looked at this and agreed that there is no changes and that they don't see any issues with it.
I think, Pollyanna, you're on the Ag Commission, aren't you? Do you have any comment on that? Yes, we have. Come on up to the microphone.
Pollyanna Ford, Walnut Ave, we did discuss it. About the only thing that came up is that we were curious as to, all right. We were curious as to the footage. I don't think we had a problem with it. I think that it was just, we were curious as to who picks these numbers, you know, and how you pick these numbers. It's kind of, you know, out there. That was the only discussion that we had. I'm going to walk away now.
Thanks, Pollyanna. You did a wonderful job.
There's no change to the setback numbers that have existed for many, many years. The lot setback for accessory structures, there's no change to that at all.
Okay. Any other comments or questions around Article 3? Pollyanna, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Kidding. Okay, we can move on then to Article 4.
All right, Article 4 is to amend Section 303 and Section 104, 104 being definitions and 303 being the sign ordinance. This is an issue came up, again, with the setbacks. Signs are not subject to the setback requirements because they need to be closer to the road than structures, but there was some conflict in the, between the definition and the question of setbacks. We've always done signs 10 feet back from the road when the setback, like in the IBR, is really 35. So this clarifies that signs, which are structures, are not subject to the setback requirements of the zoning ordinance. So they can remain 10 feet, which is what we've always done.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this article? All right, Nancy, we can move on to Article 5.
This next article is to amend Section 603, Conservation Subdivision. This past year, the Planning Board had a very rare conservation subdivision application, and going through that, we realized, again, that we had some conflicting language in here. This is a section of the ordinance that isn't used very often. These are quite rare. So the proposal here is to do two things, or two specific things, the biggest things in here. The first is to allow duplexes. When the original conservation subdivision ordinance was written, duplexes were not on the radar screen and were not considered. So the ordinance as it exists is silent regarding duplexes. And we realize that that caused actually a great deal of confusion. So we're adding duplexes to the ordinance where they weren't listed before, and they are subject to the needed space and frontage and all that. So adding duplexes. The second change in this is, in the current ordinance, there are two ways to determine the density of development that you can have in a conservation subdivision. One is a numbers calculation, and the other is an actual geometry of the land calculation. We are eliminating the numbers calculation because it is confusing and it doesn't take into consideration everything that's on the land. And we are eliminating that. It's called the maximum density plan in favor of what already exists, which is a yield plan, where the developer has to, it's a very complicated process, determine everything that's on the land, easements, roads, utility lines, all of that stuff. So we're making it, everybody conforms to the same calculation needed for density development. And that's about it for that. The conservation subdivision that we had last year is pending. This does not affect that. They are under the existing one and already have gone through all this. So this is going forward.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions around this article?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. I'd like to ask a question. If the existing ordinance did not include duplexes, I don't understand why we need to specify that now.
We're specifying it now, one, to allow duplexes, and two, because there was so much confusion on this application that we had last year regarding the choice of using, building duplexes versus building single-family homes, and the calculation that they used for the land needed for those. So we thought it was fair to applicants to put duplexes in there since it was silent before, and there was some question whether duplexes, by the silence of the ordinance, were not allowed.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions around this? That's up to you, Kirsten.
Kirsten Larson, Schultz Post Road. I'm just kind of really interested in this. So if an ordinance is silent, then the legal opinion would imply that it is not allowed versus it is allowed?
Nancy?
I can't speak to the legal issue, except it was of great deal of concern and discussion. I think the answer is, and I'm not a lawyer, the answer is it's up to how you analyze the reason why duplexes were not in there. And I think what the planning board came to is this application that prompted this is going to put duplexes in. They are allowed to put duplexes in. We just thought it was clearer and better to say, yes, you can have duplexes, mention it in there, so that everybody knows duplexes are okay with the other restrictions of the ordinance, as opposed to leaving it so that somebody comes in and says, I want duplexes, they do their calculation, and there's no provision in there for duplexes. So duplexes are allowed.
Michael Castagna, 13 Buckskin Lane. I'm reading this as proposed revisions to clarify these A through G items. So, for instance, establish a minimum width of open space within a conservation division. So what is the minimum?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, thank you for that, I forgot that one. Open space is determined by this calculation I'm talking about, the yield plan. What the change does now is says that you cannot use fingers of, little strips of land, little fingers of land, and add them all up and say that is the open space that you are using for conservation. It's simply to establish a minimum of 100 feet considered open space, because the open space when you're in a conservation subdivision, the open space really controls how everything else is determined, the density of the housing. So if you have a little strip of land that's 16 inches long and you can no longer count that and add it up with all the other little strips of land, you have to actually have open space.
Thank you, Nancy.
Follow-up, Madam Moderator?
Yep.
Thank you. That's great, but I mean, there's additional information that is needed in each of these items in order to explain exactly what's being changed and what you're changing it to. For example, guidelines for allowing single-family duplex units conservation. I mean, what is the guideline? I mean, you're changing the guideline, but what is it? So, I mean, there's a lot more information that needs to be added here in order for this to be vetted properly and voted on.
Wally?
Wally Kilgore, Atlantic Ave. Yeah, to follow up with Mike's point, this is a very complicated and confusing article. A proper notification by the town, so we could have duly researched these. I mean, these may be great ideas. I don't know. This is the first time I'm seeing them, and I know I have a lot of questions about them, but without looking at the existing ordinances and zoning regulations, it's very hard to establish those questions. So again, I would reiterate my first comment prior, which is that none of these 5 or 4, is it 5? I don't even know, 4 articles are invalid in my mind, and I would encourage the voters to vote no on the strict point that none of us could vet these prior to this meeting. And people that are impacted by these decisions were generally unaware of them because of the town's, I don't want to, inability to post them properly on the avenues that most of us seek out our information. So I will be voting no on all 4 of these articles, regardless of their validity, because I don't think the town has had the ability to do their due diligence in researching these, and so that's my comment. And it has nothing to do with Nancy. This is obviously an oversight by the town, and I find it absolutely appalling.
Nancy, do you want to answer the public comment around that? Wally? Yeah. Either one.
Obviously, if anybody would like, and I can do this, or you can, anybody can go and talk to Rick Milner, who's the planning and zoning coordinator for Northampton. But if anybody wants a copy of this that shows what the entire ordinance is, I'll be happy to email it. If you give me your email address before you leave, I'll be happy to do that, or speak to Rick if you have any specific. It is very complicated, the conservation thing. Is very complicated process, and he can explain it a little bit better than I can, but I'm happy to email the ordinance so you can take a look at it if anybody wants it.
Nancy, are the ordinances posted anywhere on the website?
I believe they're posted on the planning board, but I haven't looked at it myself. They normally are. So I'll say probably.
Okay, is there a way that we could verify that they could be posted on the planning board?
Yes, I can make sure that they're put on if they're not there.
Okay, great.
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic. I'm going to speak to the town people who are interested in this and getting more detail. Nancy, are these discussed in the work sessions of the planning board? And could residents find information in those meeting minutes that would that give them the basis of the discussion amongst the members and how this originated?
Yes, all the zoning ordinances are discussed in the work sessions, and the minutes include the discussion. After the ordinance is voted on by the planning board, it's moved to a public hearing. The public hearings are notified, and all those minutes also are available, Kathy. All the comments and questions at public hearings are in the minutes and the comments from the board.
Kirsten Larson Schultz, Post Road. Knowing a little bit more of the background of, I'm guessing, what this stems from, and sad that we are not able to speak to others that might be impacted because they probably didn't know or whatnot, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on Article 5? All right, before we close out, I just want to remind everyone, school deliberative session is Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Be there or be square. Voting will be March 14th, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the gym. We do have, Sue here has a sign-up sheet if anyone wants to work the elections. Now's a nice time to already sign yourself up, Pollyanna. And that's it. Since there's no other business we need to address today, this meeting is officially closed. Thank you, everyone, for coming out in this cold weather.
No need for